person checks their bank account after receiving a raise only to feel poorer than 2 years ago. Visual metaphor. A person running hard on a treadmill, sweating and pushing themselves. The treadmill belt moves backward faster than the runner's speed. People around the runner comment, "It's just the economy, bad luck, and maybe I need a better side hustle." A shadowy figure is seen programming the treadmill to move backward. Flashback to a specific Sunday evening over 50 years ago. Nick introduces himself to the audience. Addresses viewers who feel like they're redoing everything right but still can't afford the life their parents had. Nick encourages viewers to subscribe and like the video. Nick announces the topic, the greatest theft in human history. Nick reveals that nobody went to jail for this event. And it was called modernization. Title card appears with distinct sound design. Nick leans forward, holding up a dollar bill. Nick asks the audience, "What is this?" Audience members respond, "It's money." Nick explains the difference between money and currency. Nick describes how, before 1971, a dollar bill was a claim check for gold.
Ow.
Visual. Someone walks into a bank with $35 and exchanges it for an ounce of gold. Nick explains the dollar's value is tied to something physical and finite. Nick states that the tether between the dollar and gold was cut. Nick gives a brief history. For thousands of years, money was a commodity. Cows, salt, gold, silver. A king wants to fight a war and must tax citizens to pay for it. Citizens refuse to pay taxes, and the war ends. Physical limitation of money acts as a leash on government power. Politicians are shown frustrated by the leash. Nick says, "Politicians hate leashes." Transition. Let's go back to the scene of the crime. Footage. President Richard Nixon sitting in the Oval Office on August 15, 1971. Families across America watch TV. Some grilling in the backyard. TV programming is interrupted for Nixon's emergency address. Nixon discusses the struggling economy, rising inflation, and foreign nations demanding gold. France is shown cashing in dollars for gold. America realizes it doesn't have enough gold to cover all printed receipts. Nixon delivers the sentence, "I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold." Nick highlights the word temporarily. A calendar flips forward 53 years, showing the temporary measure still in effect. Graph appears showing the purchasing power of the dollar plummeting after 1971. Nick explains that Nixon changed the physics of the global economy. The dollar transforms from a claim check on gold to a faith-based promise from the government. Nick introduces the scary math. Nick stands at a whiteboard ready to run the numbers. Nick explains, $100,000 in cash from 1971 is still $100,000, but its purchasing power has dropped over 87%. Visual. A pile of cash labeled $100,000 shrinks in value over time. To buy what $100,000 bought in 1971, you'd need nearly $800,000 today. Nick asks if wages have gone up too. Nick points out the website WTF happened in 1971 with charts of economic horror. Chart shows productivity and wages growing together from 1945 to 1971. In 1971, chart lines split. Productivity rises, wages flatline. Nick asks, if we are working harder and producing more, but our wages aren't buying more, where did the value go? Value flows to asset owners and those closest to the money printer. Nick introduces the Cantillon Effect, explaining how new money benefits big banks, contractors, and corporations first. Visual, new money flows to big banks, government contractors, and large corporations. These groups buy stocks, real estate, and assets at today's prices. By the time new money reaches workers, prices have already risen. Workers receive diluted dollars, buying less than before. Nick concludes, you are effectively drinking the backwash of the economy. A crowd of people walk through city streets, looking frustrated but not rioting. A narrator poses the question, why aren't people rioting about this? A group of people sit in a living room, watching news about inflation on TV, looking confused. A close-up of a human brain illustration, highlighting the concept of money illusion. A person receives a paycheck, smiles at the higher number, feeling satisfied. The same person looks at rising prices in a grocery store, frowning. Chart appears showing a 3% raise versus 5% inflation, with a negative result. The person's brain releases dopamine as they see the bigger paycheck. A government official smiles as people celebrate their raises. A government official quietly stamps inflation on a document behind closed doors. A family receives a bill labeled 10% tax on savings, looking shocked and angry. The family protests at a government building, holding signs. Instead, the government prints more money in a back room, unnoticed by the public. A visual of money being printed with a shadowy group watching. A person's savings account balance drops due to inflation, but no bill arrives. The person blames the grocery store for high prices. Another person blames the gas station for rising costs. A group of people argue about corporate greed as prices rise. The narrator explains, "You are blaming the symptoms, not the disease." A shadowy room full of unelected officials decide currency value behind closed doors. Stock footage of the Federal Reserve building appears. A sign reads, "Federal Reserve, dual mandate, maximum employment and stable prices." A timeline shows the dollar losing value since 1971. A chart displays the decline of the dollar's purchasing power. A narrator reveals, "They want inflation." A visual of the U.S. national debt counter spinning rapidly past $34 trillion. A person tries to comprehend the size of $34 trillion, looking overwhelmed. A graphic shows counting to a trillion taking 31,000 years. A group of people look at a mountain of debt, appearing hopeless. Narrator asks, "What's the exit strategy?" Printing press churns out stacks of money labeled inflation. A ham sandwich is shown with a price tag of $1 trillion. A government official easily pays off debt with inflated currency. A person's savings visibly shrink as inflation rises. Nick sits at a desk with a serious expression, introducing the debt trap. A flashback to 1971, showing the transition from gold-backed money to fiat money. A bank employee creates money by typing numbers into a computer for a loan. The person signs a mortgage agreement, unaware money is created from nothing. A visual of money supply growing as more loans are issued. The chart shows debt increasing over time. A narrator explains, "If everyone paid off their debts tomorrow, the money supply would collapse." A global map highlights countries dependent on growing debt. People struggle with student loans, car payments, credit cards, and mortgages. A timeline shows the introduction of credit scores in 1989. A person checks their FICO score, looking anxious. A comparison. In the 1950s, people used cash for purchases. Today, credit cards dominate. A narrator states, "Cash is king in the 1950s. Today, cash is trash." A person saves cash, watching its value decrease over time. Chart shows the dollar's decline against assets like houses. A person wonders why houses are so expensive. A house from 1970 is compared to a modern house, showing little change in materials. A price tag on a house changes from $20,000 in 1970 to $400,000 today. A ruler labeled dollar shrinks in size, illustrating devaluation. A narrator explains, "We are living in a financial hallucination." Split screen. Left side, a person saves cash. Right side, another buys assets. A responsible saver puts $10,000 in a savings account in 1980. Reckless Ron borrows $10,000 to buy gold or land. 40 years later, the saver has $25,000, looking disappointed. Reckless Ron's gold or land is worth hundreds of thousands, looking triumphant. Ron pays back his loan with cheaper inflated dollars. Our narrator explains, "The system punished the saver and rewarded the borrower." A classroom scene. Children are taught to save money and avoid debt. A narrator reveals, "Those rules were true under a gold standard." A visual of the board game flipping upside down, confusing the players. A narrator concludes, "They didn't send us the new rulebook." Nick addresses the audience, acknowledging their concerns and fears about the financial system. Nick lists the problems. The system is rigged, money is losing value, and government actions resemble counterfeiting. Nick humorously suggests buying a bunker, then immediately advises against it. Nick reassures viewers that fear is unnecessary. Understanding the system is key. Nick explains that wealth is not destroyed but transferred from currency holders to asset holders. Nick introduces the concept of surviving the post-1971 financial paradigm. Nick presents Rule 1. Do not store wealth in fiat currency. Nick explains the importance of keeping only enough cash for emergencies and short-term bills. Nick emphasizes that cash should be used for transactions, not for saving. Nick presents Rule 2, Own Scarcity. Nick lists examples of things governments can print: dollars, yen, euros. Nick lists examples of things governments cannot print: land, gold, Bitcoin, profitable businesses. Nick explains the concept of hard supply cap and how assets with scarcity rise in value. Nick presents Rule 3, Use debt strategically. Nick warns about the dangers of debt and distinguishes between bad debt and good debt. Nick defines bad debt as borrowing for depreciating items, cars, clothes, vacations. Nick defines good debt as borrowing fixed-rate money to buy appreciating assets. Nick gives an example. A 30-year fixed mortgage at a low rate during high inflation benefits the borrower. Nick explains that borrowing under these conditions is effectively shorting the dollar. Nick transitions to the conclusion, signaling a shift in tone and mood. Nick is shown back in the studio, with more intimate lighting. Nick reflects on the significance of the 1971 betrayal and its impact on trust. Nick explains how the severing of the gold standard broke the link between effort and reward. Nick describes the new reality. Hard work and saving are no longer enough. Nick states that people are now forced to become investors and take risks to maintain their position. Nick empathizes with the audience, acknowledging the exhaustion this causes. Nick offers hope. Now that viewers understand the system, they can stop running blindly. Nick encourages viewers to step off the treadmill and start building a portfolio of real assets. Nick emphasizes the importance of assets outside the reach of printing presses and political promises. Nick asserts that the day money stopped being real was a turning point in the financial game. Nick reassures viewers that they do not have to lose in this new paradigm. Nick invites viewers to find value in the deep dive and hints at a future video about the shadow banking system. Nick describes the shadow banking system as a quadrillion-dollar market with little regulation. Nick encourages viewers to subscribe and turn on notifications for future content. Nick asks viewers to comment on whether they believe the gold standard will return or if the dollar is doomed. Nick thanks the audience for watching. Nick closes with his signature phrase, "Keep thinking." A visual of Nick fades out as the video ends. A subscribe button appears on screen inviting viewers to take action. A notification bell icon animates to encourage viewers to enable alerts. A comment section prompt appears inviting engagement. A teaser for the next video about the shadow banking system flashes briefly. A visual summary of the 3 rules appears on screen for viewers to review. A graphic showing the transfer of wealth from currency holders to asset holders is displayed. A visual representation of fiat currencies dollars, yen, euros being printed. A contrasting visual of scarce assets land, gold, Bitcoin, businesses remaining stable. An illustration of a treadmill moving backward, symbolizing the challenge of keeping up. A visual of someone stepping off the treadmill, representing the shift in strategy. A portfolio of real assets is shown being built, symbolizing financial resilience. A graphic of the 1971 gold standard event, highlighting the historical breach. A depiction of the broken link between effort and reward. A visual of people taking risks, investing, and adapting to the new financial reality. A final scene of Nick, contemplative, encouraging viewers to keep learning and thinking.